morning, everybody. So I've been thinking a lot about the idea of attention recently. Sometimes I find it a little difficult to focus. Do you ever struggle to focus? I mean, I know... No? Not Nathan. No, I know this is probably a silly question to ask in church like this, where I believe the unofficial motto is, "Oh, look, a squirrel." Yeah. Yeah, sometimes choosing a task that's really important and really matters and staying on it and giving it all of our presence is a little difficult. In fact, I find it so difficult that I've wondered sometimes whether I have ADHD. I don't have a formal diagnosis or anything, but a few years ago I did start thinking about this, so I went and got a book by Gabor Mate. I mean, some of you probably know this author. He wrote the amazing book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which is our favorite book here on the subject of addiction. But he also wrote this book on ADHD. It's called Scattered Minds. And so I booked some time. I got the book. I went to a coffee shop. I think I was taking one of my kids to an event, and while they were at the event, I said, "I'll sit down for a few hours. I'll read this book. I'll figure out whether I have ADHD." And so I sat down and I got through the first few pages. But then I had this really interesting idea about a branch of mathematics called lambda calculus. And so I had to look that up, and then I had to solve some equations and teach myself the basics of it. And so at the end of 3 hours, when it was time to go and pick up my kid, I'd learned some really interesting stuff, but I hadn't got very far on the concept of ADHD. So to this day, I have no idea whether I struggle with ADHD and whether distraction is a thing that it is one of my problems. So no, I probably don't. I'm probably fine. But it's hard, isn't it, sometimes? There's a lot of different things that are grabbing our attention and are demanding our focus. I've worked over the course of my career several times on trading floors. These are the big rooms at banks and oil companies where people come together and follow the markets and trade stocks and bonds and futures and derivatives and all these different types of things. And I remember back in 2004 when I was working down in Houston, and I walked onto my first trading floor. It's a big room, row upon row of desks, and every desk, each trader had 6 different screens in front of them, and these screens have got half a dozen windows in each of them. And there are so many facts, so many charts, so many graphs, so many messages, and it kind of blew my mind. I was like, how can anyone possibly be expected to think deeply when they are surrounded by so much information coming in at them from every possible angle? But then something kind of changed over the last few years, because this thing that seemed quite startling, quite odd 15 years ago, now it's almost normal. It's almost standard for all of us, isn't it? I noticed the other day when I was sitting at my desk, I was like, I have 5 different devices, I think, in front of me. I've got 2 laptops, I've got 2 phones, I've got an iPad. Some of them have got more than 1 screens. If I look at my browser, goodness knows how many tabs I have open at any one time. Actually, quick question here. What's the most tabs you've ever had open in your browser at once? I did a little survey in my family. The results were quite surprising. 5? Over 100. Okay, so over 100 over here. Can anyone beat 100? No, 100 is a lot of tabs. Hello, Nathan.
You said 100.
Over here. Yes. I don't think I've ever been that high, but I've had a lot of windows open, a lot of tabs, and that's kind of life these days, isn't it? We have so many things that we're trying to take care of, so many things we're trying to be aware of, so many pop-ups, so many interruptions. Have you ever been really trying to get a hold of something, some complicated idea, and some nice person phones you up and they say that, I don't know, they're from the CRA and you've got a problem with your account and you have to pay them some Bitcoin, or someone claiming to be from Amazon who's demanding money. Like these interruptions happen all the time, don't they? And so last week I read a very good book by Johann Hari, an author I've mentioned from here a couple of times before. He wrote this book that came out this year called Stolen Focus. He noticed that, no, this really is a genuine problem. And studies have shown that over the last few decades, our ability to pay attention has been going down and down. We used to be much better at holding an idea for a long period of time. We used to be able to take one concept and mine it and dig into it for longer than we're able to do now. And he became quite worried about this. And so he did some research. He interviewed a lot of the world experts on the concept of attention, asked them what they were noticing. And I'm just going to read out a couple of the findings from some of the studies that he did. And right at the beginning of the book, he says a small study investigated how often an average American college student actually pays attention to anything. So the scientists put tracking software on their computers and monitored what they did in a typical day. They discovered that, on average, a student would switch tasks once every 65 seconds. The median amount of time they focused on anything was just 19 seconds. A study by Gloria Mark at the University of California observed how long on average an adult working in an office stays on one task. It was 3 minutes. We are switching all the time. And it has a cost to us. A study by Professor Michael Posner at the University of Oregon found that if you are focusing on something and you get interrupted, on average it would take 23 minutes for you to get back to the same state of focus. Have you noticed this? You're working on something, you're really getting somewhere. Somebody comes in, the doorbell rings, the phone goes, one of your colleagues asks you just one quick question, email pops up, and you're like, oh, okay, where was I? We build up this mental stack, and it's like a Jenga tower. Someone pushes it over, and then you've got to start building it up again from the beginning. A different study of office workers in the US found most of them never get an hour of uninterrupted work in a typical day. And that's the world we're living in. Our computers have changed the way that we do work. But unfortunately, our brains haven't changed in the slightest. Evolutionarily speaking, our brains are the same lump of a pound or two of matter that we've had for the last 100,000 years or more. In comparison, the internet, I realized, is only 10,000 days old. That's not very long when you think about it. This is a brand new invention, and we're still figuring out how to live with it, how to deal with it, how to interact with this massive change that has come about in our lives. And computers, unlike us, are actually pretty good at doing lots of things at once. Just to find out, a while back I wrote some software and said, how many different tasks can I get this computer to do at once? Normal, regular laptop, I found I could get it to do 1 million different things at the same time. You can switch between 1 million processes, not a problem. It's not really doing things at the same time. When your computer's running lots of different programs, it does what it's called context switching. It focuses on one thing for a few milliseconds, and then it pauses and goes on to the next thing, and then it does the next thing, and then it does the next thing, and it goes around to the beginning. And it switches so fast that you don't notice it. You think your computer is doing all these things at once. But our brains are not very good at context switching. Every time we get interrupted, we have to stop. You have to think, what was going on? What was I focusing on? Where am I paying attention? And switching attention costs us something. A study commissioned by Hewlett-Packard looked at the IQ of some of the workers in two situations. At first, they tested their IQ when they were not being distracted or interrupted. And then they tested their IQ when they were receiving emails and phone calls. The study found that technological distraction, just getting emails and calls, caused a drop in the worker's IQ by an average of 10 points. Yeah, so your brain drops when you're getting interrupted all the time. Apparently that's twice as much drop as you get just from getting high. So it's better to smoke a little bit of weed than to get interrupted constantly. That's not a recommendation, just a scientific observation. And one study at Carnegie Mellon's University Human-Computer Interaction Lab took 136 students and got them to take a test. Some of them had to have their phones switched off, and others had their phones on and received intermittent text messages. The students who received messages performed, on average, 20% worse. So, interruption. And studies have noticed as well that not only are we not quite as smart when we're getting interrupted, but it's very hard to be creative. One of my favorite concepts in psychology is this idea of a flow state. Have you heard this idea of flow state? Have you ever had this idea, this experience? You are working on something and it's absorbing you fully. Your mind is in it. You are completely paying attention to this task to the point where you don't notice time going past. It might have been an hour, it might have been 2 hours, and you haven't noticed because you are there and you are present. It might be a task you're working on. It might be a conversation you're having with someone. These are the times that we find genuinely worthwhile, the things we look back on and say, then I was truly alive. And it's very hard to stay in a flow state when you've been interrupted all the time, isn't it? Attention. It's interesting to me that we say pay attention, isn't it? Attention is almost something that can be spent, that can be demanded out of us, that can be stolen. Attention is a currency. And Hari goes on to talk about some of the other reasons that we are struggling to pay attention these days. And there's a lot. There's the stress that most of us are under. There's pandemics. There are environmental causes. If you're exposed to lead in childhood, then it causes a drop in your ability to pay attention. But I don't want to talk about all of them. I actually only want to talk about one more. And again, this is technological. Recently, a recruiter from Facebook reached out to me and said, "Hi, I'm with the Facebook data science team. Would you like a job? Would you be interested in working for us?" And I said, "That's a bit of a problem, actually. I'm not sure I can work for your company. I have some quite serious issues with the way that Facebook, and in fact, most other social media companies work and how they function." Have you ever thought, when you're scrolling through Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or TikTok or one of these platforms, why it shows you certain stories, why it shows you certain images, how it picks personally for you what you're going to see? Now, you might think it's simple, whatever my friends have posted in the order they've posted them. That's how it used to work. It's very simple. Anyone can write an algorithm to do that. But it's not what it does at all. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all these other companies have spent billions of dollars over the last few years hiring some of the best data scientists in the world, spending a vast amount of money on machines and computers, on machine learning, on neural networks. And what these computers do is every time you interact with one of these services, every time you click on an image, every time you share something, every time you follow a link, every time you comment on a friend's post, every time you turn the app on, every time you turn it off, they note this. They record it. Put it in a big database. And they feed it into a neural network that's trying to solve one very particular problem. And the problem is this: how can the system get you to spend more time looking at the service? How does Facebook make money? Do you pay Facebook any money? Do you have a subscription with Twitter? No, of course you don't. They give it to you for free. It's a gift. It's very kind of them, because Mark Zuckerberg is just that generous. You're not paying. The advertisers are paying, of course. They pay Facebook. Facebook delivers your eyeballs to them. And the longer that you spend on the platform, the more commercials you see, the more the advertisers make money. So it's very much in these companies' interests to get you to spend as much time as possible. And so they didn't just guess. They didn't just say, well, what do we think is going to make people spend time on it? They went and did very, very serious research. So as I said, every single action you take is measured, it's monitored, it's fed into a system, metrics are created and counted, and the neural network has said, okay, what types of information should we put in front of people to make them pay more attention? What should we show Roy to get him to stay online for a little bit longer? What should we show you to get you to stay online a little bit longer? What should we show Heather that will get her to stay online just a little bit longer? And the answer is a little bit different for every person. It's always very personalized. But they did find certain key factors that seem to be very, very universal. And a bit of a problem emerged as they did this. And the problem is this: humans kind of suck. There are things that capture our attention that aren't really demonstrative of the best parts of our nature. So here's an example. If you want a YouTube video to get more views, then you choose what words go in the title. And they found that the words that will get the most clicks, the most views, are hate, obliterate, slam, destroy. That's how you get views on YouTube. A major study at New York University found that for every word of moral outrage you add to a tweet, your retweet rate will go up by 20% on average. And the words that will increase your retweet the most are attack, bad, and blame. A study...
So that I can put them on the box page?
Absolutely, yes. If you want followers, this is how to do it. It's all here. A study by Pew Research Center found that if you fill your Facebook posts with indignant disagreement, you will double your likes and shares. I love that. Indignant disagreement. So yes, if you want to become a social media icon, be angry. Rage. We often talk about the fruits of the Spirit here at Vox, don't we? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. But just before Paul talks about the fruits of the Spirit in the previous verse, he talks about what he calls the acts of the flesh, what you might think of as the darker side of human nature. he gives another list, things that we do if we're kind of left to our own devices. And the list is long, but several things really jumped out at me as I read it this week. He says, when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division, envy. In other words, all the things that will get you the most shares on Facebook and Twitter. So Facebook spent several $1 billion building a neural network to learn this, and I think Paul already knew this. We could have just looked it up in Galatians. But outrage, it's addictive. We like it. When we see other people being outraged, we're drawn to it. But it's something I think we do need to be very careful of. A few years ago, I had this strong impression that for Lent that year, I had to give up outrage. It's a bit strange to give up just a sort of abstract concept, but I genuinely tried it. And I don't know if you've ever given up anything for Lent, but I'm sure you've noticed that there's nothing that will make you pay attention to something more than trying to give it up. If I'd given up sugar, then I am sure that I would have noticed every single donut shop in Barrie. I would have been walking down the street and going, oh, donuts, oh, candy, oh, Tim Hortons. But instead I gave up outrage. And exactly the same thing happened. I noticed very acutely just how many people were trying all the time to make me outraged. This person wants to make me angry. This message is trying to stir up some kind of righteous indignation in me. Because it works. But my point today isn't actually really about outrage. This is an unfortunate fact of human nature. It's something that these machine learning algorithms have discovered about us. It's true, but the algorithms, they don't care. They don't have any. The algorithm doesn't have a particular opinion. It's not really even trying to make you outraged. It only wants one thing, and it wants your attention. It wants you to focus and to pay attention to what it's trying to sell you. And if outrage is what works, then outrage is what it will sell. And if you take only one thing away from this, it's this, that we will pay attention to something in our lives. And either we would choose what it is, or somebody else would choose for us. So I know that's a little bit depressing, but actually I'm surprisingly optimistic. I mean, I could look at it and go, well, I don't have a chance here. Like, on the one side, there is a company with several $1 billion worth of machine learning expertise, the best data scientists in the world, and a huge budget trying to capture my attention through every tool it has. And on the other side, there's me who can get distracted halfway through the middle of a sentence. But I'm optimistic. I actually think human nature is a little bit better than this. Last week, this is actually pretty much what got me thinking about this sermon. I was on the streetcar, trundling along King Street from Union Station, and I was looking down the length of the cars, the 4 cars that are connected, and I noticed something about people getting on and off the car. Every single person who got on the streetcar, got on, swiped their card, sat down, immediately phone comes out. Head down, scrolling. I'm like, yeah, this system is kind of working. Everyone's attention has been grabbed by their phones. They're not choosing how to pay attention. The choice has been made for them. This is a very clear demonstration of all the things that Johann Hari is warning about in his book. But then something different happened. A couple of hours later, with some friends, we went to a climbing gym on Bathurst Street, just around the corner. This gym, it's not a huge gym, it's a bouldering gym. There's room for maybe 20 people perhaps to be climbing at any one time, and easily there was 100 people in the room. So most of them were sitting around on the benches waiting for their turn to climb, and these were all the same people that had been on the streetcar earlier that day. And a typical slice of Toronto. Nobody was on their phones. Not a single person in the room. They were climbing, or they were sitting on the benches, looking at the routes, talking to their friends. They had chosen for that hour, for those 2 hours, that this is what they were going to do. This was where their attention was going to be spent. They were spending time with their friends doing something they thought was valuable and meaningful. I think we can pay attention. I think we can choose what we pay attention to. All right, shall we look at the Bible? I guess this is a sermon, so we should probably do that. I've been reading Philippians this week. St. Paul, he was a guy who had a few things to say about attention. This book is interesting because it was written, like several of his books, when he was in prison. I would say that the Roman Empire had captured his attention. What are you thinking about today? You're thinking about the prison walls. You're thinking about the prison guards. You are thinking about how stuck you are. And I think, Paul could have kind of gone on a rant about the Romans at this point. I think he would have had every right to engage in indignant moral outrage. And strangely enough, he doesn't. Now, he doesn't ignore the fact that he's in prison. He talks about it. He mentions it. He doesn't ignore the fact that there's a Roman soldier, staring him down 24/7. Like in Ephesians, he talks about a way of living that is pleasing to God. And he's looking for a metaphor. What metaphor should I use to really drive my point home? And I think he must have just looked up and said, oh, well, here's a Roman soldier. You should put on, the helmet of salvation. And, this guy has a breastplate. So the breastplate of righteousness and a shield of faith. He knows that his situation is bad. He knows that he's in prison. He recognizes that this is happening. But this isn't the main point of his focus. He does not come up with brilliant cutting memes about the Roman Empire. I'm sure he could have done if he'd wanted to. But instead, he says something different when he gives advice to the people he's writing to. He says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. That's quite a passage. It's interesting to me, Paul doesn't even give specifics here. I think he trusts his listeners a little bit. For you, what is true? What is right? What is noble? What are you going to think about? Now, there's plenty of other times in the Bible where our attention is drawn to very specific things. The prophet Isaiah says, see, I am doing a new thing. Pay attention. God is doing something important over here, and if your focus is over here, you are going to miss it. Jesus, when he's teaching, draws people's attention to things. Sometimes he says things like, consider the lilies of the field. I'm trying to make a point here. Look at this flower. Take some time. This is what we're thinking about right now. Look at this flower. Look at how it's connected to its ecosystem. Look about how it grows. Look at what it does and look at what it doesn't do. Take some time and think about that. The author of Hebrews says, fix your eyes on Jesus. Here's a thing that you should be paying attention to. But Paul, in this letter, gives us a framework. And I think we're almost invited for ourselves to fill in the dots a little bit. He says, whatever is true, for example. And he's starting with the difficult one, because truth is, frankly, these days a little bit of a tricky topic. We have people making a lot of claims about a lot of things. We have a lot of people saying, no, those are lies. We're expected somehow to find our way through this, to figure out what is true and what isn't. And I had a whole passage written about this, about how we might approach the mental challenge of working our way through truth and lies in this day and age. And then my wonderful wife said to me, no, overcomplicating things. What do we do here at Vox when something gets complicated? We go back to Jesus. We go back to the Gospels. My favorite verse for the last 20 years in the entire Bible has been John chapter 8, verse 32. And Jesus says, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. See, truth has this characteristic about it. When we get it, we find freedom. And I don't know about you, but I've tried a lot of things in life. Some ideas, some ways of living, some ways of looking at the world, some ways of thinking about other people, some ways of thinking about myself. Sometimes they've worked and sometimes they haven't. Sometimes they have not provided freedom. Sometimes I've ended up trapped. Maybe you've had this experience. And I think truth is that which sets us free, then the opposite is also true. I really try to hammer this point home to myself especially. If it doesn't set you free, it isn't true. So whatever is true, Paul says, think about things that are true. Think about the things that set you free. He goes on, whatever is true, whatever is noble. I kind of paused on this one. Noble, honorable. I don't think we talk about nobility very often these days. I'm not sure it's a concept that we really lean into. But are there people in your lives that you look at and go, the way that you live, that is honorable, that is noble, that inspires me. When we were driving across the country earlier this year to go to General Assembly, we stopped just outside North Bay at the Terry Fox Memorial. Thunder Bay, thank you. Terry Fox Memorial. And I was very glad to do this. Obviously, I've known the story of Terry Fox for a very long time, but to go and see somewhere tangible set up at the spot where he had to stop his marathon of hope, and to think about just how far it was. We'd driven from Barrie, and it had taken us many, many, many hours to get up there. And Barrie is a long way across Canada from the start. And to realize just what he'd done and against what odds. And I found it very emotional. I started crying when I saw the memorial. There is something about his character, something about his spirit. There's a reason why he tops lists of the most respected Canadian. What about you? Is there someone that you look at and go, yeah, there's a nobility there to that character? I invite you to think about these people. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right. What is right? In the Bible, right and righteousness and justice, these terms are often tied together, aren't they? Are there people in your life you look at and you go, you live in a way that is right. You live in a way that brings justice to your community. You live in a way that makes your community a better place. People are better because of the way that you live. Are there people like that in your lives? Think about them. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure. Yeah, purity. I think this is a difficult one as well. You can think about cleanliness. Washing your hands, it's a good idea. It's a good idea to do that before you eat. But purity, we have to be careful with. This is a concept that has been weaponized sometimes, I think. We can just look back at the history of the 20th century that brought us phrases like racial purity or ethnic cleansing. These are very, very ugly terms. I know many people who have been hurt by what we call purity culture, a way of doing Christianity that shames people for who they are, what their bodies look like. So we have to be careful with purity. But again, what do we do when things are difficult? We go back to Jesus. So I went back to Jesus again. Matthew 15. Jesus was approached by some teachers of the law. They're complaining as usual. They say, some teachers of the law came to Jesus and asked, why do your disciples break the traditions of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat. They found a reason to look down on Jesus and a reason to look down on his disciples. Look at his disciples. Look how dirty they are. Ew, very impure, not like us. We get things right. We're the right kind of people, and they are the wrong kinds of people. They are impure. And they're hoping, I think, that Jesus will agree with them. He doesn't, of course. Jesus called the crowd together and said, pay attention. Like that? It's getting their attention, something important right here. Let's focus on this. Pay attention and try to understand what I mean. Yeah, I think Jesus maybe had a long day at this point, of teaching. Try to understand. This point I'm trying to get across. I've said it a few times. Please try to understand. The food you put into your mouth doesn't make you unclean and unfit to worship God. The bad words that come out of your mouth are what make you unclean. As far as Jesus is concerned, purity isn't about being part of the right group. It isn't about performing the right social ritual to show that you are in and they are out. For Jesus, purity seems to have so much more to do with how we speak. How do I talk to other people? How do I talk about other people? I wonder sometimes whether the things I put out on Twitter or Facebook, are they pure? Are they filled with, moral outrage and indignation? Or are they pure? Do they lift people up? Do they talk well about others? Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely. I like this. I like that Paul says, it's okay to have a sense of aesthetics. It's okay to appreciate beauty. It's necessary to appreciate beauty. How can we function well in life if we don't stop and pay attention and focus on things that are beautiful? Because it's hard to sometimes. A little bit later on in our trip, as we drove across Canada, after General Assembly, we drove out to the Rockies. We drove the Icefield Parkway, which is absolutely stunning. We camped in Banff. We woke up and looked out of the tent and saw snow on the top of the mountains all around us. And then we went up to Lake Louise. And I don't know if you've been there, but I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. And when you see the pictures, you're like, no, that can't quite be real. Like this is like, I mean, it's very postcardy. It's like this is emerald blue lake and these mountains in the background, and it almost looks like a painting. And you're like, that's a bit over the top. Like nothing in the real world can actually look like quite that deep blue. And then you get there and you're like, oh, no, it really does. It really is that stunning. This is without a doubt, if not the most beautiful place on the planet, then it's got to be in the top 10. And as we walked around Lake Louise, taking it in, we walked past the mother and her 2 children who were utterly, utterly miserable. And they weren't miserable because of the view. They were miserable because the games they were playing on their little handheld devices weren't going well for them. They weren't working, or they were broken, or I don't know, the video game characters were beating them, or they weren't scoring enough points, or I don't know what it was. But here, in the most stunning scenery and landscape imaginable, this is where their attention was. I don't think that 50 years from now, when they look back on their life and where they've been and where they've gone, they will look back with pleasure at that experience of losing in their video game and missing some of the most amazing beauty on the planet. Take time. I know life is busy. I know life grabs at us. Jesus even warns about this in the parable of the sower. You remember that one? One of the examples is said of the sower throwing his seed out. He says, some of the seed falls among thorns. And he says, these are the seeds, the people who hear the word of God, but then the worries and the cares of this world choke the seed and make it unfruitful. It's so easy. And I get this, like sometimes I'm buried in Twitter, I'm buried on my phone, I'm buried and so focused and so much attention is being paid on the things that are stressful, the things that are scary, that I miss the beauty that is all around us. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything is excellent or praiseworthy. Well, this is a great one to finish on. I'm glad Paul put this in. Because I know I just went on a very big rant about the internet, but on the flip side, the internet is amazing because it gives us so many ways to witness things that are excellent, admirable, and praiseworthy. And for you, maybe the things that you find admirable are different from me. I mean, you probably don't have exactly the same special interests as I do. But I do find it incredible that we can get to witness the amazing things that humans are capable of. Just this last week, as is our Thanksgiving ritual, Heather and I watched the Ironman World Championships. So maybe this doesn't excite, you're not excited, but we are very excited about the idea of watching people swim for an hour and then bike for about 5 hours straight and then run for several hours. And I don't know, it's very gripping because after like 6 hours of racing, one person overtakes somebody else and then they run to the finish line. But it's an example of paying attention. Heather and I did a marathon earlier this year down in Toronto. And as we got close to it, we had to do some pretty long runs to train for it. We'd go out on a Saturday morning, and at 8 o'clock, we'd be running. And then at 9 o'clock, we'd be running. And then it would be 10 o'clock, and we would be running. And then at 11 o'clock, we'd be running. And then at 12 o'clock, our attention was really taken up with some very important running. And then eventually we got to go home and pay attention to other things. But these people who achieve the things that inspire us have figured out how to pay attention to something that matters, to give it the full and undivided focus. To say, this, out of the 1,000 things I could be paying attention to, I'm going to say no to 999 of them, because this is the thing that matters. Yeah, so many things of excellence that we have the opportunity to witness. I've watched Adam Ondra this week climbing. He spent a year trying to figure out how to climb the hardest rock climbing route in the world. And it's an amazing video, an incredible demonstration of excellence. A few weeks ago, Nathan shared with me a video of a funk jazz group called Snarky Puppy. Some of you have seen this. Now, I'm no genius at musical theory, but I think that if I'd spent several years studying musical theory, I would just about be ready to look at this video and go, oh, that's pretty clever what they're doing. 20 different musicians all playing perfectly together in an incredibly complex routine. excellent, admirable, praiseworthy. What about you? What do you find exciting? Maybe you're not me. Maybe you don't get excited about the idea of watching someone ride a bike in a circle for an hour, which is what I did on Saturday. I'll tell you all about it afterwards if you're interested. The hour record for cycling. Very, very thrilling. Maybe you didn't stay up last year for 7 hours to watch the World Chess Championships. Game 6 went on for 7 hours. It was great. Gripping. Yeah, but you have other things, I'm sure. And that's fine. And that Paul is not saying these are the things you must pay attention to. Paul is giving us categories. What is pure? What is right? What is noble? What is admirable? What is excellent? What do you find amazing? Pay attention. Think about such things. And then something I didn't realize until I went back to the passage this week is Paul finishes with a promise. He says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I'll invite the worship team to come up. But peace, what a great idea in a world that's so noisy with so many people trying to get us, to pull us in a million different directions. Peace sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Now, in a world of noise, amidst the clamor of 1,000 competing voices, may your attention be drawn back to truth. May you be inspired by the honorable. May you be encouraged by those who strive for justice. May you speak words that are pure. May you be delighted by beauty, and may you be thrilled by excellence. And may grace and peace be with you.